Welcome to the Explainer. We're going to dive right in today because we have a truly fascinating journey ahead of us. We are taking a chronological trip through the totally wild, surprising, and just incredibly unique evolution of Canadian money. We'll see how this nation's currency transformed from literal seashells washed up on a beach all the way to the highly complex macroeconomic charts of modern global finance. Let's get right into it.
So let me hit you with a bit of a bizarre question to kick things off. What does seashells, ordinary playing cards, and a massive 100-kilogram pure gold coin all have in common? Honestly, it sounds like the inventory of a really confused pirate, right? Well, the crazy answer is that every single one of these items has officially served as Canadian currency at different points in history. No joke.
Shells to playing cards. To actually understand how we get to a modern dollar, we've got to jump way back in time, to the absolute Wild West of early North American commerce.
Looking at this early timeline, you'll see we start long before the Canadian dollar ever existed. Back then, commerce was just handled completely differently. We kick off with indigenous peoples trading these meticulously crafted wampum belts, as well as Haida copper shields. Then, as European settlers arrived, things got a little chaotic, leading to some truly desperate colonial experiments with paper money around 1685. Believe it or not, it actually took until the 1871 Uniform Currency Act to finally unite the country under a single Canadian dollar. Now, what's truly staggering here is the sheer amount of manual labor involved in this early currency. Indigenous wampums weren't just money, they were absolutely vital diplomatic tools used to seal treaties, and making them agonizingly slow. It could take up to 119 days just to craft a single belt of 5,000 shells. Plus, they had a very clear exchange rate. Dark shells were a lot harder to process, so they held exactly double the value of white ones. Basically, 8 white shells or 4 dark shells would get you exactly 1 penny.
Fast forward a bit to 1685 in New France. The colonies ran into a massive problem. They had a severe shortage of actual coins being shipped over from Europe. So the local official in charge of finances, Intendant Jacques de Maules, well, he had soldiers to pay and literally no money to do it. His brilliant, slightly desperate solution? He collected ordinary playing cards, cut them into pieces, signed them, stamped them, and basically just issued them as temporary paper money. The best part is, the locals happily accepted them, and it actually saved the whole colonial economy from collapsing.
Section 2, the 1935 Banknote Series. Let's move our story forward a big chunk to the Great Depression. As the global economy was just getting completely ravaged, the newly formed Bank of Canada stepped in to take firm control of the nation's money supply.
So, they released their very first series of banknotes, and it had a uniquely Canadian quirk. Instead of printing one bilingual bill like they do today, they printed 2 entirely separate sets of banknotes. One set was entirely in English for the rest of Canada, and the other was entirely in French for Quebec. And wow, did this lead to some intense cultural friction. The deputy governor of the bank actually reported that English speakers were purposely mutilating the French notes they received, while the French population was complaining they just couldn't get enough of their own notes.
But hey, despite all that drama, these notes were really stunning. They had this beautiful, formal Baroque design. The fronts displayed portraits of the British royal family. But here's a fun little historical secret for you. The bank purposely used older photographs of the royals for the engravings. Why? So they appeared younger than they actually were on the new notes. Kind of an early version of a social media filter, right? Meanwhile, the backs of the bills featured these sweeping allegories of industry, nature, and transportation.
There was, however, one major design flaw. The $1 note was green, and the $2 note was blue. Now that sounds distinct enough, right? Well, soon after release, a local newspaper pointed out that under the really dim artificial lighting of the 1930s, the green and blue hues looked almost identical. People were constantly confusing them. It became such a massive headache that in 1937, the bank was actually forced to change the $2 note to a terracotta red. Section 3, Birth of the Loonie. Let's transition from that era of beautiful, sometimes confusing paper banknotes right into the modern era of iconic metal coins. This is where the currency really takes on a personality of its own. Okay, so in 1987, Canada introduced a brand new $1 coin to replace the paper bill. It was gold-colored and uniquely 11-sided, and on the back, it featured a water bird known as a loon. The Canadian public immediately gave it a nickname. They called it the Loonie, and it became so universally loved that when the $2 coin came out in 1996, which featured a polar bear, the public, logically and very affectionately, dubbed it the Toonie. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. The crucial takeaway here is how unbelievably fast these terms became deeply embedded in the national identity.
But you should know the Royal Canadian Mint doesn't just make pocket change. To brilliantly illustrate their ambition, in 2007, they minted an absurdly massive 100-kilogram coin. And it wasn't just any metal. It was made of 99.999% pure gold. It was created purely as a testament to Canadian gold production and craftsmanship. To this day, it remains one of the absolute largest and purest gold coins ever created in human history. Just wild to think about. Section 4. Money and Canadian slang. Having physical money like the loonie and toonie jingling around in your pocket directly shaped the culture. Let's pivot and look at this unique cultural impact. Let's do a rapid-fire translation for anyone planning a visit. A Canuck, which is basically slang for a Canadian, might take their loonies and toonies down to a coffee shop they call Timmy's. There, they're probably going to order a double-double, which is a coffee with exactly 2 creams and 2 sugars. Later on, they might hit the liquor store to grab a Mickey. That's a flask-sized bottle of liquor that fits perfectly in your pocket, and a 2-4, which is a case of 24 beers. Or maybe they just want a pop, which is what they call soda. And whatever they decide to do, they are absolutely going to give her, meaning they're going to give it all they've got. Section 5. The exchange rate roller coaster. All that cultural charm aside, money is still fundamentally about economics. Let's shift gears and look at the macroeconomic drama of how this currency is actually performed on the global stage.
When you map the Canadian dollar against the US dollar from 1953 to 2016, you'll immediately notice something. It is definitely not a flat line. It's a dramatic roller coaster of extreme highs and lows. You see, the Canadian dollar began floating on the global market back in 1970, and those massive peaks and valleys, well, they're inextricably linked to the global cycles of commodities, especially oil. Basically, when the world is hungry for Canada's natural resources, the dollar soars, and when they aren't, it plummets.
Let me highlight a very painful number for Canadians: 61.79 US cents. Ouch. That is the all-time historic low the Canadian dollar hit in January 2002. Now, why did that happen? It was really the culmination of years of domestic budget deficits, all combined with the harsh fallout from international economic crises in emerging markets. At this specific point, buying imported goods or trying to travel south was just incredibly expensive for any Canuck.
But look at the incredible contrast. Fast forward just a few years to November 2007. Driven by an absolutely massive global boom in oil and commodity prices, the Canadian dollar shot straight up to a triumphant peak of $1.10 US dollars. The currency was so unbelievably strong and resilient that the Canadian edition of Time magazine literally named the Canadian dollar their 2007 Newsmaker of the Year. No way, right? A currency winning Newsmaker of the Year?
But, as they always say, what goes up must come down. Notice this recent freefall starting in 2011. As global oil prices suddenly collapsed, the Canadian dollar followed right behind it, suffering a brutal 35% decline by 2016. That's actually the fastest modern-day decline in the currency's entire history, and it perfectly matches the severity of the massive bear markets we saw back in the 70s and 90s. It just goes to show how tightly tethered the loonie really is to whatever is being pulled out of the ground.
Which brings us to our final thought. After experiencing that historic 35% bear market drop, where exactly is the Canadian economic roller coaster heading next? I mean, this is a currency born from seashells and cut-up playing cards. It's been shaped by really fun cultural quirks, and today it's driven by the totally unpredictable swings of global oil and commodities. So I want you to take a look at today's commodity prices, think about the state of the world right now, and ask yourself, what do you think the next chapter holds in the wild story of the Canadian dollar? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.